There you go.
Hi there.
Hi,
I
hi, Hannah.
Hi. Wonderful. So I am here as part of my name is Hannah Yore. I'm the director of international programs at Sage, and I am here today as part to collect stories from
Mm-hmm,
LGBTIQ older adults that we work with
mm-hmm,
all over the world.
mm-hmm,
And so, without further ado, Dede, may I ask you to introduce yourself, share a little bit about your background,
mm-hmm.
where and when you were born, and then we'll get started and talk a little bit
Yeah,
more
yeah.
about your activism and your legacy in the field of LGBTIQ human rights.
Okay. Thanks, Hannah. Hi, everyone. My name is Dede Utomo. I was born in Pasuruan, East Java, Indonesia in 1953. And I'm both an activist and an academic. Right now, I'm active in my own organization called Gaya Nusantara. Um, and Academically, I'm adjunct lecturer at a few universities in Surabaya, where I live now, which is not very far from Pasuruan. Uh, with some friends, I founded the first gay organization. The trans people, our trans sisters, have done it before in the 60s. But in 1982, we set up Lambda Indonesia, um, which I believe is the first gay organization in Indonesia, probably in Asia. But that still needs research. And then for this and that reason, in 1987, again with some friends, I continued the work with Gaya Nusantara, my current organization. So we're still around. We're preparing for our 40th anniversary, hopefully with the publication and festivities. Although we will have to be careful because to do things openly in Indonesia, it, we may be disrupted, but it's not impossible.
Thank you. And I want to talk more about all the details of your activism
Mhm,
and your
mhm.
scholarship.
Sure.
But before we get into that, can you share a little bit about your childhood and your upbringing,
Okay.
and maybe how some of that had inspired your later activism?
Yeah. I'm from a minority ethnic group and also a subgroup from that in that minority. I mean, in Indonesia, I would be called an ethnic Chinese Indonesian. My ancestors came from Fujian province, southern China, around the 19th century. Uh, and only men came at that time. And so they married local women. And out of that, mixed marriage, came up a culture where it's a hybrid culture. There's some Chinese there, there's some local, and for me, the local it will be Javanese and Madurese in East Java. Um, and so in many ways, I am an unusual Indonesian. I was brought with no religion at home because my parents they didn't hate religion, but they thought it was not relevant. But I was sent to Catholic school, so a lot of my thinking has been influenced by that. Although then I was only Catholic for about 3 years before I left the church because not it just didn't make sense to me, and I want I understood a larger spiritual and and moral world. So yeah, and then I had I had my Catholic education for 12 years in Pasuruan, no, in Pasuruan and Surabaya, the two cities, the both cities, and then I continued into a teachers' college in Surabaya and later in Malang for about 5.5 years. And I was fortunate after that to get a scholarship to Cornell University to teach Indonesian. And the quid pro quo is that I got to do PhD work in linguistics and Southeast Asian studies. um, with with tuition waiver, so to speak, and I got a stipend and all that. So it was wonderful. Um, yeah, so that's a and with hindsight, I would say that my parents tra raised us gender free. So just uh, a couple of little examples. So my father he thought I would be like him, a big game hunter, wild boar, tigers, deer. No, I was not good, but I was good at cleaning rifles. Preparing for his hunting trips. But my mother during rainy days would actually clothe me in warm flannel clothes and would teach me embroidery and appliques and making rag dolls. And my father didn't bat an eyelid, and so I think I'm lucky that I was raised gender free. Early on, probably when I was 10 or 11, I already knew that I liked boys, men. Um, but I wasn't sure. At first, I thought it was everybody would go through that, but then I quickly realized that this is not usual. This is not. So I was a bit afraid, but not paranoid. But eventually, just to make a long story short, by the time I was 20, I I just got tired of the crushes and inability to express my attraction to men my age at the time, and so I finally went to seek help from a psychologist. Thankfully, there are no electrodes, there was no lobotomy, but a lot of reading, but also some health checks which I could not afford. By that time, I was already teaching English at a U.S. Indonesia binational center, but not enough to for the trip to the capital, Jakarta, for well, those days they thought my hormone was wrong or something. So I had to tell my parents, right? So I told my parents, look, mom, dad, I need help. And they were actually, they're pragmatic people. And they said, okay, you need help? We'll go with you. I mean, actually, my dad went with me. It took about, I don't know how many days it was, the tests and everything. And I went back and right. What continued seeing the psychologist, and but yes, as I said, he gave me readings, and the more I read, the more I realized that there's nothing wrong with me, and so it was a question of actually, picking up my courage. So eventually, just to make a long story short, by the time I was at Cornell in the winter intersession of 1979 and 80, I decided to come out to everyone, my parents, friends, professors. Yeah, so and I immediately joined. Once spring semester started, I joined Cornell. It was called Gay People at Cornell. It used to be called Cornell Gay Liberation. And I later learned that Cornell Gay Liberation started as the Student Homophile League in 1968, probably the second campus group in the U.S. And then I learned something from that, and I brought it home, and I started Lambda Indonesia in 1982. I think that's like a quick
Yeah.
a quick
Recap.
history, a recap of yeah.
Yeah. Well, just to say for my part, no need to make a long story short. I would love to hear it all and as much as
Well, the
you're
thing
willing
is,
to share, but yeah,
this story I have written, and I believe but later, maybe you can provide links or something.
absolutely.
I have written about these, and later we'll discuss. So that people can
Learn
read
more.
complete story. They're long.
Yeah. Well,
One
thank you
hour
so
long,
much for
10 pages.
sharing. we can absolutely link out
We'll
to
we'll
his
we'll we'll
narratives.
we'll update when the time comes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing all that, and we'll absolutely link out more to the narratives where you've
Mhm.
expanded on everything you've just mentioned. I want to go back to, now we're here in your Cornell years,
Yes.
and right after where you founded Lambda Indonesia, which, as you've already
Hmm.
mentioned, was one of the first,
Hmm.
if not the first, LGBTIQ organization in the region at the time.
Yeah.
Um, you've also run for public office representing the People's Democratic Party. You've
Right.
authored
Later.
a
Yeah.
number of books. So just thinking back on your
Hmm.
life and thinking back on your scholarship and your activism,
Hmm.
are there particular moments or accomplishments that stand out that you're either most proud of or that
Mm.
stick out in your mind as being most formative or poignant, perhaps, for lack of a better word?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I think the first time, of course, is the coming out. It's interesting. I could share this with you. My late professor Ben Anderson, who is famous for his work on imagined communities and on nationalism, said, why are you banging your head against this? Your culture had or has had all kinds of acceptance for I guess now we would call it gender sexual diversity. And I know, I guess I was brazen enough to tell him, I mean, he's my professor, and as an Asian, we usually respect teachers very much. I still respect him. I said, but I call him Pa Ben, Mr. Ben, or Father Ben. Pa Ben, I cannot go back to being, a traditionalist puppeteer or, martial arts specialist or, whatever. I am a modern person in the Indonesian mold, and this is my calling. And I probably mentioned, well, let's see. When I reach out to people, if they think that I'm actually crazy and not. If they think I'm un-Indonesian, they will not respond. They would actually just probably, condemn me or whatever. But those days, no. The early years, I did not get any um, hate speech or homophobic or queerphobic reactions. If anything, even the mainstream media was very supportive. They were curious, but they were supportive. So I guess I could be proud to say that I actually, I mean, I'm very conscious that I followed the on the steps of our, of the trans movement in the late '60s. But I guess I'll mention it, and if you can edit it if it's relevant. There is a good book now called The Made Up State by Benjamin Hegarty. If people are interested, that actually tells the history of the trans movement and actually the different constructions of trans identities in Indonesia. And so I just was like it was like a relay race. I was the next runner. Yeah. So later I learned also from the work of Saskia Wieringa, a emerita professor at the University of Amsterdam, who just, well, early this year, I think, published a book on the history of lesbian organizing in Indonesia, and we were actually going together, and later on, I think by the early '90s, we kind of we worked together and tried to exchange ideas and publish in each other's publications and things like that. I think I should also add that a bit different from the trans movement, the gay movement, which I kind of pioneered, I guess, uh, relied a lot on what the late Ben Anderson would call print capitalism, which is, I mean, it's a pompous way of saying we publish zines. Nowadays they
Right.
would be called zines.
Yes.
And I'm actually quite proud that was it last month or 2 months ago? Our zines, together with other zines from Southeast Asia, were actually featured in an exhibit at the Schules Museum, the gay museum in Berlin.
I would love to see these. They sound fabulous.
I'll have to find
We'll connect offline
yeah,
and
yeah, and
yeah.
I'll see. But it's like, wow, okay, well, I guess it was significant, and I'm
Yeah,
actually quite happy. I should mention our wonderful Queer Indonesia Archive team. They have digitized, I
oh,
think, just about any zine that has been published up to 2010. They
that's
they they,
fabulous.
they concentrate on the
Hmm.
old time or the previous times, because the later times, they're all digital.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
at least the zines are safe, and many
right.
pictures, many posters, many articles, and it's still building. So that's I guess that's the academic part of me, and also I came from a long line of journalists in my family, so publication was important, and I suppose if you read Imagine Communities by the late Brett Anderson, you can understand because that was how the nationalist movement started in many parts of the world, also especially also Indonesia, and it's not perfect, but it actually brought independence,
Yeah.
and of course, the whole decolonization thing
Hmm.
started with publishing small newspapers. I mean, they're small, 2,000 copies print run and all that, but if the impact is incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to, it's
Hmm.
interesting hearing you speak about working in coalition with different folks, whether it's working, with trans brothers and sisters, working with
Hmm.
lesbians, working
Hmm.
internationally, working in
Hmm.
academia. You've had relationships with folks in so many different types of spaces, whether
Hmm.
they're activists or academic, or even the ones that
Hmm.
you talk about fondly with your family and how they
Hmm.
received you when you came out.
Hmm.
Um, I am also, you know, wondering if it sounds like when you first came out, you were, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe I don't know if you were surprised that folks received you well or were not, that you didn't receive a lot of stigma at least at the beginning of your journey.
Hmm. Hmm.
But as you does that resonate? Is that
Yes,
true?
yes. I mean,
Okay,
I think I was ready, and probably my hunch was that this is
sure.
going to be all right.
Right.
And it turned out to be true.
Yeah.
Certainly from my family, it was okay as long as you're happy.
Hmm.
And sure, we're not
Yeah.
gonna be disappointed that you're not, gonna form a heterosexual family
Yeah.
and and continue the whatever the family line and all that. I mean,
Right.
that was not an issue, and also from the media. Uh, the surprise came a bit later,
Okay.
probably like after the year 2000, actually. That, oh, there are all these attacks.
Sure. Well, that's what I was going to ask you next about. So
Yeah.
in your
Mm.
later years and as you became more of a, I guess, public figure, as it were,
Mm.
did you
Mm.
receive backlash? How did you respond to it? What was that experience like, personally and emotionally? And then how did you persist?
Exactly. Well, see, I grew up under the dictatorship of the Suharto dictatorship, it's called the New Order. Well, let me stop there because I don't want to get too long. But basically, we learn to be careful. We learn to duck when it's necessary. We learn to operate underground. For example, just one example, we would disguise political meetings as breaking the fast, as iftar during Ramadan, for example. So that's kind of safe. But the discussion was like, what is our next step? Things like that. Yeah. So I guess you learn to be careful. You learn to be creative. Unfortunately, some people, you know, fell on the wayside along the journey. But then came the end of the dictatorship. We thought it would be the end of the dictatorship, the spring of 98 to, I'd say about 2010, just to be optimistic. Yeah, so we were, unpleasantly surprised, but what I can say that most activists and our allies have not backed down until now. So this is what's good. And I also grew up. I mean, people like me grew up at school with the nationalist discourse that we are a fighting nation. You see an obstacle and and you think it's disturbing your struggle for a good society. You fight. So I mean, yeah. So until now, now of course we know it is unfortunate that we have to operate underground, which means that we are not that visible.
Sure.
But people are creative, I mean, some parts of Indonesia are safer than others. So some provinces even have pride. Of course, it's a different kind of pride, but it is pride nevertheless. It's in a safe space and all that. And but then afterwards, that they announce on social media, "Hey, we had pride."
Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
remember the first Pride that you ever attended and how you felt and
For
what your
myself,
observations were?
myself was San Francisco 1980.
Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
was teaching at the UC Berkeley. I was teaching Indonesian at the so-called Indonesian Studies Summer Institute,
Uh-huh.
excuse me, at University of California, Berkeley, and I learned. By that time, I was out.
Sure.
I learned about, there's going to be Pride. So I went with some friends to San Francisco that morning, and I did not march yet.
Okay. Okay. You were an
But
observer at the time.
yeah, I was a
Yeah.
server. I was on the yeah, I was watching, and that was I remember the thing that went into my mind is like, this is it. I'm not going back into the closet. I'm proud.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So the first time I actually marched, like um, I mean, March was actually in Manila Pride
Okay.
2002.
Mm.
I did March as what we then had a small network called Asia Pacific Rainbow, which unfortunately has folded.
Mm.
But in Surabaya, well, with the support of the French Cultural Center, whose director was gay, and he said, well, in 1999 there was the partnership law in France, and he said, well, we should celebrate the PAX or something, is PACS. And this Mr. Dmitriev Kilikov, who's still around, I can't remember where he is now, but he's still around, said, "Well, Dede, let's do a pride." And so there was a discussion. There happened to be a French photographer who took who had so we had like a queer exhibition, and there was a drag show. So it was well, Dimitri called it, no, really, this is pride. This is Indonesia's first pride with the help of the French, liberté,
Yeah.
égalité,
Right. Yeah.
fraternité.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so 99 we did that, and I think Queer Indonesia Archive has some pictures and posters from that. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's
So when you think about, I mean, you have so many observations of
mhm,
decades of the
mhm, mhm.
LGBTIQ
Right.
movement. And of course, I say LGBTIQ movement, that can mean so many things to so
Of
many,
course,
so
of
many
course.
people. So
Yeah.
please take that with a grain of salt. How do you view in this moment, what are we,
Mm,
2025, February 2025, the current
yeah,
state of the LGBTIQ movement,
I know.
both Indonesia and
And
globally?
the
What progress
globally.
has been made that you've observed? What areas most concern you, most need
Yeah,
attention?
yeah,
I know
yeah.
that's a really big question, but
No, I know. It's
respond as
okay.
you feel.
Yeah, my gut feeling is that I'm annoyed.
Fair. I like that.
We
Annoyed.
had gone pretty far,
Yep.
and suddenly we had to face this annoying. I'm not going to even mention names. It's, not to soil my mouth.
Yeah, I understand.
You understand who
I understand.
both
And
in
hopefully the
Indonesia.
viewers do too. Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So
Yeah.
but again, the spirit of a fighting nation. Um, the movement is quite robust in many parts of the world. I mean, in Indonesia, it's still there. Okay, registered organization, I would say about 100 organizations registered. I mean, of
In
course,
Indonesia. Okay.
yeah,
Right.
we had to lie. 98 of those organizations had to lie and said, "Oh, we're just a social organization.
Sure.
We do gatherings, we do charity."
Yeah.
Um, the two of them were actually registered as an LGBTIQ plus organization. So
Okay.
somebody will have to study that why it's possible.
Yeah.
In the region, well, Thailand has marriage equality, so that's something. But we are also carefully critical that it is also it could be pink washing
Hmm.
for the military dictator. Well, then okay, I have to be careful. They're not a dictatorship, but the military, I mean, dominates the Senate, the upper house of the assembly. Singapore decriminalized. It's still a long way. Yeah, but there are also regressions in Aceh. Gay men still got flogged, but to be fair, together with heterosexual couples who commit adultery or fornication, people who drink, and so it's for the Chinese to have it's their struggle. We support them and all that, and amazingly there are still a few organizations in Aceh operating underground. Yeah. Well, they're also a fighting nation. So since the 19th century. So yeah, China is not in good shape. A lot of my comrades from China are in exile in Europe or in the West, basically, and organizations have had to at least go underground or disband. Yeah, so what is it that was say? One step forward, two step back, or the other way around. um, but the movement is there. There are allies. The UN is a good ally. Governments that have not been taken over by the right wing politicians are still okay. I mean, just as an example, earlier you mentioned, the disruption of the State Department funding for even for SAGE.
Mhm.
This also happens to us in our program together with Outright Action International in Eastern Indonesia, where we strengthen communities and actually two cities in East Indonesia have local ordinances against discrimination. Uh, we do it strategically. It's not only SOGSC, it includes disability, minority religion, women, all that. Yeah. So we're in for a long fight,
Yeah.
and I suppose what is it that Lenin said? Revolutionary patient or something like that. I'm translating back to it from Indonesian.
Right. Back
Uh,
in Ting.
yeah,
Yeah.
so you got to be revolutionary, but you got to have the patience and the wisdom to
Right. Yep, sustain ourselves. And you
yeah.
mentioned working just now
Hmm.
in coalition with folks living with disability and women's groups. I wonder,
Yeah,
can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been working across movements? I think
yeah,
that's a
yeah.
particular strategy right now for, you know, that all of us need to keep in mind. Of course, I'm here based as, a
Of course,
younger
of course.
lesbian here in the United States at a very particular political moment. And can you talk a little bit about the strategies of working across difference, across movements,
Yeah,
and how that can sustain us, especially when they're increasingly
yeah, yeah.
repressive forces.
Right. Excuse me. I learned from an old survivor of the 1965 genocide. I mean, those of you who know Indonesian history, you know, in 1965-66, about at least 500,000 people who were, accused of being communist or left-wing nationalist, progressive people were decimated. They were sent, so this gentleman, Mr. Uy, who's still alive, um, was sent to the penal colony of Buru, and it's Indonesia's Gulag, in 1968, I think. Was there for 11 years. So basically I learned from him that the pressure from the oppressors actually make us unite and make us stronger. I mean, and so I think a lot of Indonesians have that realization. So from early on, we had allies. First, it was some academics and the media. My late Professor Anderson, as much as he was critical, he was supportive. He gave me all his dossiers on traditional um, gender sexual diversity. Yeah, and then other people his age, kind of critically said, well, you're a bit too out, but anyway, but here's something to read, and I'm willing to be your correspondent, and this and that city. So first it was the academics, and then the journalists, and then the Planned Parenthood people. Bless them, because see, they know that they're dealing with sexuality, they're dealing
Sure,
with gender,
sure.
and the enemy also knows that young people who are not the regular cisgender heterosexual
Hmm.
kids would veer towards them because at least
Hmm.
they could be volunteers in Planned Parenthood, which also means comprehensive sexual education, and of course because it's comprehensive, they get to learn and also share their experience of being trans, being non-binary, being gay, lesbian, um, um, whatever.
Yeah.
So those came later, and then by around the mid '90s, so-called mainstream human rights activists and women organizations started saying, they're also oppressed. So we have to build coalitions, and a bit later, progressive religionists, progressive
Mhm.
religious scholars, mostly from the Muslim and Protestant. I insist, I emphasize Protestant, because the Catholics came, and so I think the Catholics are still really late.
Yeah.
Sorry. um, so you work with faith organizations. And especially minority faith-based organizations, they share our oppression. I mean, there's our sense of having to fight. So now I guess if you are a progressive person, meaning that somebody who believes in or sometimes we call ourselves humanists, to be safer, you're together. I mean, Women's March, there'll be rainbow flags. Of course, the police may confiscate the rainbow flags, and increasingly it's a progressive pride flag. You know,
Yeah.
the
Right.
so it's not rocket science. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's helpful.
That's the
That's helpful.
intersectionality we've achieved. And if anything, sometimes there is a good organization called Sajuk. In English, it would be Journalist Association for Diversity. The D&DI.
Yep. Sure.
Oops, I'll stop there. And sometimes they actually publish, and they're journalists and they're good with social media. They,
Yeah.
they, they publish a series of memes, and we just repost them. I mean,
That's great.
we're busy with
Yeah.
other things.
Right.
Yeah.
Everyone has their skill set that they bring
So
to the
I mean, in
table. So.
Indonesia, unless you're so rabidly conservative and I'm sorry to say rabidly stupid,
Hmm.
then you'll be part of the movement. I mean, the movement to maintain democracy, which
Sure.
has been regressing in the past 10 years or so. And we, you probably know we have a president who is
Yes, I do.
a champion in human rights violations, but
Yes.
hey, the law didn't work. Yes,
Yeah.
but well, we keep reminding people, he is a criminal.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's an ongoing, and myself, as one of the first people to start, I'm actually quite pleased and quite happy that there are so many activists.
Yeah.
Oh, I should mention the Indonesian Green Party, who has a Soji SC division.
Oh my. Okay.
Yeah, I mean they
Wow.
didn't make it to the election in 2024, but
Hmm.
they're aiming at 2029. So if you are a member of the Green Party, of course you have to be environmentally conscious,
Right.
green, but you also have to be rainbow
Okay. Green and
because
rainbow.
green and
Important
rainbow,
distinction. Green and rainbow. Yeah.
and their slogan, I mean, well, their unofficial slogan is, love the environment, love the humanity.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that.
Well, I'm not a member. They also don't force me. But
Mhm.
I support them,
Right. Right.
and you know, all different organizations in all over Indonesia support
So speaking of, working across difference in
them.
coalition with folks that may share a similar kind of mission or end goal of how what you describe as
Yeah, yeah.
humanism in the progressive sense. I would love to talk a little bit about intergenerational relationships,
Mm,
how that
mm,
can be both personally fulfilling and then also
yeah.
strategic for movement work. So before we talk specifically about intergenerational relationships and
Hmm.
building and
Hmm.
building that into our movements, can you share a little bit about your experience growing older? What are some in your observations, both in your work and then in your
Hmm.
personal life? What are some of the challenges, maybe some of the joys facing LGBTIQ elders that may not be visible to younger folks? I mean, this could be anything, whether
Okay, I'll
issues,
be speaking. I'll be
healthcare,
speaking.
housing.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
be speaking as an activist, and
sure.
so you know, and in Indonesia, and I think also elsewhere actually, but in Indonesia more so, young people respect older people who are not annoying.
Okay.
Who
Not
don't
annoying.
force
Say
them.
more. Say more.
Yeah, I mean because and so so young activists, well, students. I'm a teacher, so I still teach. My students, they are polite, they are respectful, and I do not abuse their respect. I listen to them also, because when I was young, I knew, I mean, I noticed that some older people were a bit annoying. They say, "Oh, you have to be this." This is like, hey, let me make my own mistakes and learn from them, and think that kind of thing. So I think we're all right. We're healthy. I would say 90% of the activists in any movement in Indonesia, whether it's the environment, labor, LGBTIQ plus, are aged between like 18 to 30.
Young, very young.
I
Yeah,
mean, my people like me, ooh, there are probably only the three or four left. Unfortunately, some have passed.
sure.
But and at least from myself, and I think the other oldies in the movement, at least in the queer and trans movement, we know when to shut up. And we have the patience to listen, and let the young ones make their mistakes, and then if they come and ask for advice or something, we'll give them a piece of our mind. But
And do they come to seek
yes,
advice? Okay.
yes. My nickname in the queer and trans movement in Indonesia is Grandma, Oma.
Grandma. Oh, okay.
I'm
I
the
love
Oma. I mean, and that's my nod to the non-binariness.
beautiful. Yes, I like that.
So I'm actually quite proud of that, and yeah. I must say that I didn't realize suddenly, ooh, I'm 71. No,
Mhm.
that actually hit me when I was 70. I mean, in a good way. I was all
Right,
excited actually. It was like
right.
another epiphany, and so, ooh, 70. And well, in the sense that, hey, I made it this far.
Yeah.
And then, when I turned 71, I think fingers crossed, I'll probably reach 90.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, but also this wisdom maybe, or this magnanimity, I guess it's called,
Sure.
that hey, the movement belongs to all these activists, and I did start, but hey, it's their world, it's their movement. So that's in terms of the movement, yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of relationships, in Indonesia is still in many ways like Greece.
Okay.
I have broken a lot of hearts of young men who said, "Grandpa, Grandma, I want to be your lover. I'm sorry, I happen to be monogamous right now, so we can be friends, but can you please
Yeah.
respect my relationship?
Mm, mm.
Go to Grandpa so and so. I think he's a bit more like open relationship.
Right. More interested,
I mean,
perhaps, a bit more
hey,
available.
this is where I actually I'm a bit insistent actually when I work with young people. Look, don't never think of sex as negative. I mean, consensual sex.
Yes.
That's why we're fighting.
Hmm.
We are, the goal is pleasure, which
Yeah.
is, legitimate pleasure. I mean, and yeah.
Yeah.
So
I love that. I love that. I really like that the goal is pleasure and pleasure in all senses, it
yes,
also in
yes.
terms of
I
like
mean,
enjoying our humanity and
if you are
yeah.
religiously spiritual, sure,
Sure.
we support you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm actually quite proud to share that there are queer and trans faith leaders now. They are under attack, probably more than people attack me,
Mm.
because they are still in the faith.
Sure.
They say that the way we're also Muslim, we're also Catholic, we're also Christian, whatever.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, they're beholden to different standards,
Well,
perhaps.
yeah, I mean,
Like,
and if you believe in diversity, and you also believe in any diversity, including
yeah.
spiritual and whatever.
Yeah. You mentioned that the vast
Mhm.
majority of activists that you work with are younger, between
Yes,
18 and
yes.
30.
Mhm.
Younger than me also. Sometimes, it's so funny doing kind of intergenerational work and then feeling like
Mhm.
a lesbian in my 30s. I'm like, am I
Mhm.
younger? Am I what, it's
Right,
also
right,
up
right.
to interpretation of what is young, what is old, what does it all mean?
Sure.
And it's just up to the
Yeah,
individual.
yeah, yeah.
But I guess why do you think that is that it's more younger folks involved in movement work?
Well,
And what are the barriers for
I think for people who are now in their 40s and 50s,
Mhm.
they were not sure
Mhm.
they wanted to join the movement. Some of them would support from, I would say, from the sidelines.
Okay.
Some of them, business people who support the movement. For example, I should mention a national couple. Well, I won't mention the names just to be safe.
Okay.
Who run establishments, hospitality establishments, and they go out of their way to hire people with disabilities, trans people, LGBT people. And if they want to be kind of, discreet, sure. Uh, I wish there would be more of these, but maybe there are more, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the young people, I don't want to say this negatively, but they know what they want, and if they want something, they have to get it. In Indonesia, they call it the instant generation, which
Instant.
yeah,
Okay. Like instant.
instant,
Okay.
instant noodles. You click on your text message, it gets
Yeah.
sent. I mean, I grew up with, oh, the telegram cannot be sent yet, sir.
Right. Right.
And I think again, I hope I'm not annoying to the younger people. It's their world, and so So yeah, and they have their, I mean, they again, it's not rocket science, there are people who are non-binary, and there are people who are HIV positive, and kind of, not really proud of being the positive, but proud that they actually survive being. And of course, now there's U equals U, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
of course.
and thankfully for Indonesia at least, the ART, antiretroviral
Yeah.
treatment, did not come from PEPFAR, so we are all right
Mhm.
for now. Yeah, so it's a younger generation. I sometimes think, if I were a 15-year-old boy these days, I would probably be out already because
Mm,
I was precocious. I would read. I would be marching with at least with the Women's March,
yeah,
and
yeah.
probably go to the Underground Pride festivities. They've been inviting me actually. Come on,
Oh,
Oma,
really?
come to the Pride. So, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not because I feel old. It's just that, well, it costs money to go there, and then the time and all that. I mean, yeah, but
I hope you make it there. It
one of
sounds
these
like you
days,
would be
one of these
received
days,
with a
I'll
lot of
go to one of
excitement
these
and
prides. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, before we wrap up, I mean, I think we're
Hmm.
coming to the end,
Hmm.
and I just want to say thank you so much for being in
Well,
conversation
you're
with me and
welcome. I
sharing
mean,
more
yeah.
about yourself. Is there any story from your life or topics
Mm.
that something I haven't asked you about that you want to make sure we capture in this time together?
I think, human societies are diverse. When I came out, I thought it was easy for me because I was not from a religious family. But I discover also, over the years, that there are examples from religious families who listen to God. Okay, I have a good example from I think I can mention him, of a trans man activist, Amar Alfikar, who came out to his father, and his father said, "Child, number one, I'm so proud now I have a son."
Hmm.
It's a bit sexist.
Right. I mean, yeah, wins
But
and you
okay,
take the
okay,
wins
okay.
where you get them. Right.
Probably Daddy didn't mean that. But and his father was a religious scholar. I mean, was in a small time religious scholar in a village. And he said, if God gave me you, I think this is his message is that learn about my intentions, about my thinking. You got to. These are very devout people, and so yeah, I accept you as you are. Just be careful. And his brother was, at first I thought, oh, this is not nice, but then finally, again, probably he talked to his dad, and I said, well, so I think just the message is that, there are good people everywhere, probably even in Iran or Aceh, and it may be more difficult to find them in some places like Iran and Aceh, and probably Egypt, uh, or actually the Bible Belt, maybe. Who knows?
Mhm.
But humans are creative. If you think for yourself, for your safety, um, I know there'll be victims along the way, unfortunately, but then we could use the victims as martyrs.
Mhm. Mhm.
Learn from them. People like Matthew Shepard and Harvey Milk, and
Mhm.
yeah. So yeah,
Thank
I'm 71. I'm just, as long as I'm healthy and can think, and I'll contribute as I can, doing interviews
you.
like this.
Yeah,
um, but there's thousands more out there. I mean, I'm thinking globally now, and even in the most difficult societies.
mhm.
And this is the human story.
This is the human story.
Yeah,
I think we will end it there. Thank
yeah.
you so
It
much.
was
I'm going to
nice
stop the
having you.
recording
Yeah,
now.
thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.